Hey everyone, welcome back to Exposed. I am your host, Jim Chapman, and I am back with this second episode, Notorious, covering the pop icon Britney Spears. And in episode 1 of this series, I brought you all the way back to the year 2000. Britney was in the midst of her relationship with Justin Timberlake, and she was heading toward the peak of her stardom. And that is where we are going to pick up today. So go listen to episode 1 if you want to quickly get caught up with that, and we'll continue. This is Notorious, the shocking life of Britney Spears.
My loneliness is killing me, and I must confess, I still believe. When I'm not with you, I lose my mind. Give me a sign. Hit me, baby, one more time.
So by the spring of 2001, Britney Spears was no longer the pigtailed schoolgirl who had taken the world by storm. She was 19 years old, legally an adult, and she was ready to prove it. That cute and innocent image that had launched her career was starting to feel like a cage, and she was determined to kick that door wide open. That May, she released her third studio album, simply titled Britney. It was her boldest yet, a deliberate shift from teen pop princess to sensual young woman. The lead single was actually titled I'm a Slave for You. It was a slinky, futuristic track produced by the Neptunes. The music video showed Britney in a steamy sauna covered in sweat and attitude, surrounded by dancers in raw, animalistic performances that left no doubt that girl next door had grown up.
All you people look at me like I'm a little girl. Well, did you ever think it'd be okay for me to step into this world? Always saying, little girl, don't step into the club. Well, I'm just trying to find out why, 'cause dancing's what I love. Yeah.
And the transformation reached its peak on September 6th of 2001 at the MTV Video Music Awards in New York. Britney took the stage that night wearing a live albino Burmese python draped around her shoulders like a living necklace. She was dressed in a barely there, nude-colored outfit, and she performed I'm a Slave for You with a ferocity that made the entire audience gasp. And the snake, it was real, a real heavy 15-foot python. And Britney became an instant tabloid legend. Animal rights group would protest. Parents freaked out. But the performance was a cultural earthquake, and honestly, it was genius. It announced to the world that Britney Spears was done playing it safe. At this point, she was 20 years old, in control of her image, and ready to own her own sexuality in her own terms. The album Britney debuted at number 1. It sold over 4 million copies in the US and launched the Dream Within a Dream tour, which was one of the most elaborate and expensive tours of its era. It came complete with a floating magic carpet, water scenes, and pyrotechnics that turned every night into sensory overload. Britney was working at a pace that would exhaust most adults twice her age, yet she still found time to step in front of that movie camera. In February of 2002, Crossroads hit theaters. It was Britney's first lead role, a coming-of-age road trip story about 3 best friends that were chasing their dreams from Georgia to California. She played Lucy, a small-town girl with big aspirations, and she even wrote and performed the film's end-credit song, which was called I'm Not a Girl, Not Yet a Woman.
I'm not a girl.
Critics were mixed, but teenage girls would pack those theaters. The movie grossed $60 million worldwide and gave Britney her first taste of Hollywood. On the set, she bonded with co-stars, and for a brief moment, she got to experience something that resembled a normal teenage rite of passage, even if it was scripted. But behind the sold-out tours and the movie premieres, the fairy tale romance with Justin Timberlake was quietly unraveling. The relationship that had once seemed destined had been under strain for months. Now, both were international superstars with punishing schedules. Justin's NSYNC was still dominating charts while Britney's career was exploding in new directions. The constant paparazzi presence turned every disagreement into front page news, and by early 2002, the couple had actually quietly split. Now, Britney later wrote in her memoir that the breakup was mutual, but the public narrative quickly spun it out of control. Then, on November 8th of 2002, Justin released what I would like to say is a pretty bomb-ass song, Cry Me a River. The music video featured a Britney lookalike, same blonde hair, same outfits, being confronted by a heartbroken Justin in a mansion that looked strangely like the one they had shared. The song's lyrics were raw and pointed, accusations of betrayal, accusations of cheating, and breaking his heart. Radio stations played it on a heavy rotation.
You were my sun, you were my earth. You didn't know all the ways I loved you, no. Draw me a river, draw me a river, draw me a river, draw me a river, yeah, yeah.
Tabloids would declare Britney the villain of the pop world. Fans would turn on her overnight, and she was painted as the heartbreaker, the wild one, the girl who had thrown away the perfect all-American romance, and Britney was devastated. In private, she would struggle with the public shaming. She described lying in bed for days, unable to eat, replaying every moment of the relationship, and wondering how something so private had become a global phenomenon. The double standard was glaring. Justin was celebrated as the wounded artist, and he was just pouring his pain out into his art. Britney was labeled everything from a slut to a train wreck. At 21 years old, she was learning the brutal lesson that young women in the spotlight are judged far more harshly than their male counterparts. The same media that had cheered their romance now reveled in their breakup. Yet, even in the middle of the heartbreak, Britney refused to disappear. She would channel that pain into her next chapter of life. In 2003, she released her fourth studio album, In the Zone. And it was her most mature, most experimental work yet. The lead single, Me Against the Music, was a collaboration with Madonna. The two superstars then performed it together at the 2003 MTV Video Music Awards in one of the most talked about moments in award show history, a passionate on-stage kiss that lasted just long enough to break the internet. And this was before the internet really had a name, y'all. The kiss was pure shock value. Make no mistake about it, it was also strategic. Madonna passing the torch to a new generation. The album's second single, Toxic, became an instant classic. The hypnotic string sample, the pounding beat, Britney's breathy yet powerful vocals, it was pop perfection.
Baby, can't you see I'm calling? A guy like you should wear a warning. It's dangerous, I'm falling.
The music video with Britney as a deadly single agent in multiple disguises, it was sleek, sexy, and expensive. Toxic would go on to win Grammy for Best Dance Recording and submitted In the Zone as her creative peak. The album debuted at number 1. It sold over 6 million copies worldwide, and the Onyx Hotel tour that followed sold out arenas all across the world. Now, through all of this, Britney was asserting her independence in both public and private. She bought her first home in Los Angeles, hired her own creative team, and she started speaking more openly about wanting to be taken seriously as an artist rather than just a teen idol. She experimented with new looks, new sounds, and new boundaries. The little girl from Kentwood who had once sung in a church choir was now headlining the world's biggest stages, directing her own creative vision and refusing to apologize for just growing up. But peak fame can be a dangerous place. The spotlight that had once felt like destiny was now burning brighter than ever, and the personal pressures were mounting on Britney. The very public breakup with Justin had left its scars. The relentless tabloid scrutiny that was wearing her down, and the music industry that had built her into a billion-dollar brand, it was already expecting the next reinvention. Britney was about to step into the most chaotic, most scrutinized chapter of her entire life, one that would test every single limit of her strength and her sanity. So I want you to picture this. It's the dead of night, January 2nd, 2004, inside the Palms Casino. The air is thick with cigarette smoke, expensive perfume, and reckless freedom that only Sin City can offer at 3 o'clock in the morning. Britney Spears is 22 years old. She had just come off the final exhausting legs of her In the Zone tour, and she was single for the first time in years after a very public, very painful breakup with Justin Timberlake. The world still saw her as an untouchable pop queen, but inside she was exhausted, raw, and craving something, anything that felt real. But she wasn't alone that night. With her, an unknown named Jason Alexander, a tall, easygoing guy. He was from back home in Kentwood, and Jason wasn't a celebrity. He wasn't part of that Hollywood machine. He was just simply an old friend. He was someone Britney had known since they were kids, running barefoot through the same small town streets, sharing secrets on front porches, and laughing at the same inside jokes. They had stayed loosely in touch over the years, and when Britney needed a low-key escape from the spotlight, Jason was the safe, familiar face she invited along for a quick Vegas trip. After a few drinks at the hotel bar, the conversation turned playful, then philosophical. We've all been there, had a few drinks, and you start thinking of crazy stuff to do. Life had become so scripted, so public, so unrelenting to Britney, and in that hazing, champagne-fueled moment, the idea seemed brilliant. Why not get married, right? Right here, right now. No big production, no press, just two old friends doing something impulsive and private in the one city where private was still possible. So at 3:30 in the morning on January 3rd, 2004, Britney and Jason stood hand in hand inside the little white wedding chapel, the same iconic drive-through chapel that had seen thousands of impulsive ceremonies before this one. Britney wore whatever she had thrown on that night: ripped blue jeans, a simple white tank top, and a backwards baseball cap pulled low over her blonde hair, but she was still stunningly beautiful. And Jason, he wore a casual button-down in jeans, and they bought two inexpensive silver bands from a 24-hour gift shop next door. There were no guests, no flowers, no photographers, just a sleepy officiant, a couple of witnesses pulled from the chapel staff. The ceremony lasted less than 10 minutes. They exchanged simple I do's, kissed, and signed the paperwork. For those first few hours, it felt like a rebellious little secret, a way for Britney to reclaim a piece of normalcy, a piece of her old Kentwood life in the middle of a world that she felt she had lost control of. But y'all know what happens. Secrets, they don't stay a secret in Vegas. By sunrise, the news had leaked to the tabloids. Headlines exploded everywhere, on every newsstand and on every morning show. Britney Spears marries childhood sweetheart in a secret Vegas ceremony. Grainy photos would follow. Britney flashing a peace sign outside of the chapel. Jason grinning beside her with his arm around her waist, and it flooded the internet and every TV screen. The world woke up to the story and absolutely lost its mind. But for a brief moment, it almost felt romantic. The pop princess running off with the boy from back home. But reality hit faster than you think. Exactly 55 hours after saying I do, the fairy tale was over. On January 5th of 2004, Britney's legal team filed for an annulment in Clark County District Court. The court documents were blunt and revealing. Quote, the plaintiff lacked understanding of her actions. The marriage was entered into as a joke that went too far. For Jason Alexander's part, he did agree to the annulment and he didn't contest it. The judge granted it fast and quietly the very next day. Britney would release a short, carefully worded statement. Quote, I was not in my right mind. It was a mistake born of impulse. Jason later spoke publicly, and he spoke with a mix of affection and sadness. He said he still cared deeply for Britney, but he understood the marriage had never been meant to last. In her 2023 book, The Woman in Me, Britney reflected on that wild weekend, and she used some pretty raw honesty. She described feeling lost, overwhelmed by fame, and desperate for even a monetary sense of control and connection. The annulment, however, became tabloid gold. Late night talk show hosts made endless jokes. Magazines ran Britney Vegas blunder covers for weeks, and fans were split between calling it romantic chaos and worrying that Britney was spiraling. Paparazzi now camped outside every hotel, every restaurant, and every studio Britney was involved in. Even late night outings, every new friendship, every smile, and every frown was dissected. Britney flew back to Los Angeles emotionally drained, trying to regroup and throw herself back into her work. But the impulsive 55-hour marriage, that had opened a door to the tabloid machine that would never close again. Then just 4 months later, in April of 2004, fate, or maybe the universe's idea of a plot twist, walked into the LA rehearsal studio in the form of Kevin Federline. K-Fed, as he was referred to, was tall, heavily tattooed, and laid back with a California swagger and a quiet confidence that had nothing to do with Hollywood flash. He was a good dancer, though. He even danced with major artists, including Michael Jackson. He wasn't chasing fame. He wasn't part of the pop star machine. And that, more than anything, is what drew Britney in. Their chemistry was instant and electric. Within days, they were inseparable. They were spotted everywhere, kissing in the back of an SUV, laughing over late-night dinners in L.A., dancing until sunrise in exclusive clubs. The tabloids dubbed them Britney and K-Fed and feasted on every photo. For the first time in years, Britney felt she could simply be. No image to maintain, no performance required. Kevin represented something real in a life that had become almost entirely unreal. The couple moved at lightning speed. By 2004, Britney announced she was pregnant. She was only 22 years old, unmarried, and carrying her first child while the entire world watched. The news sent shockwaves through the media. Some celebrated the fairy tale of a new beginning. Others questioned her choices. Britney, however, was overjoyed. She embraced motherhood with the same fierce determination she had once brought to the stage. On September 18th, 2004, just 5 months after they first met, Britney and Kevin made it official in a surprise but more traditional ceremony at a private home in California. This was no quick Vegas chapel stop. Britney wore an elegant white strapless gown. It flowed beautifully over her growing baby bump. Kevin wore a sharp black tuxedo, and they exchanged vows under a beautiful arch of white roses while a small string quartet played softly in the background. Close friends and family filled the intimate space, and the wedding was later featured in the footage for their reality show. But for that one golden evening, it felt loving and almost natural.
So you were here, you were single last time, now you're married, and to him. And and where did y'all meet? Yeah, y'all look like a cute couple.
Thank you.
Where did y'all meet?
We met at Joseph's.
club.
It's a nightclub. On a Monday night. A while back.
And now that must be an awkward thing, you know. You just see Britney and you think you can just go, hey, how you doing?
Hey, actually, it was her that was like, hey, how you doing?
Really? And then right away you knew that was it? Really?
It just kind of clicked.
Well, not right away. I think we kind of evolved into something bigger.
Yeah. All right, so, and when you got married, which I'm shocked because I've seen a little bit of the footage of the show, you didn't seem like you were getting ready to get married. No, that was how did he propose? Can I ask that, or is that too much? Am I being nosy?
I proposed.
You proposed? Really? And did he say yes right away?
Not right away.
No? Yeah, because it didn't look like he wanted to get married. He said love is love, and that's a commitment enough. And
Actually,
right?
I was a little rejected at first. I kind of got slapped down.
No, well, I told her, I told her that it's not right for the woman to ask the man. The man's supposed to get on one knee and do it all right and this and that. And
Whatever.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly. Whatever.
Exactly.
So then you then had to turn around and ask her.
Yeah, it took me about 5 minutes and I turned around and asked her.
Really? Yeah. That's sweet. All right. Now that felt awkward being like that. I'm just going to keep moving around. And so what is the best part about being married?
The baby?
The baby?
No, I said, she said, what's the best part about being married?
All right, let's not argue now. I mean,
That's the best part.
Yeah.
The makeups from the arguments are the best part.
Yeah?
No, you know what? Married or not, I love being with her. I mean, she's fun.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she's very sweet.
Oh, thank you.
And Brittany?
The same thing, I would say.
Because every picture really that I see, y'all are just laughing and looking like you're having fun all the time.
I mean, you can't be serious all the time.
Yeah. Well, you look like you're
too short to be serious.
Yeah, but you look
all
like
the
you're
time.
laughing all the time. You look like you're having fun, and also having fun with the fact that, I mean, because there really is nothing you can do. There's no way you can get away from, you know, the paparazzi being every single place that you go, they're there.
Their first son, Sean Preston Federline, he arrived on September 14th of 2005. Britney documented the pregnancy in the early days of motherhood with a mix of joy and exhaustion. She was determined to be a hands-on mom. She would change diapers herself, sing lullabies in the nursery, and shield her newborn from the flashing cameras that camped all the time outside of their home. Kevin stepped into the role of a proud new father, and he seemed content to focus on family. So to give fans an unfiltered look at their whirlwind life, Britney and Kevin agreed to star in a 5-episode reality series called Chaotic. And why not? What a great name. Shot mostly on handheld cameras during their early romance and marriage, that show would air in 2005. Viewers would see raw, unguarded moments, Britney dancing wildly in hotel rooms, playful arguments with Kevin over silly things, late night heart-to-hearts, even the moment she got a new tattoo. It was messy, it was intimate, and it was strangely relatable to a lot of viewers. The first time the public had seen Britney so completely unscripted. Ratings were strong, but critics called it everything from a delicious train wreck to surprisingly honest and human. For Britney, it was just an attempt to reclaim her narrative and to show the world she was more than just tabloid headlines. In the fall of 2005, Britney announced she was pregnant again. Their second son, Jaden James Federline, was born on September 12th of 2006. And by then, the Federline Spears household, they appeared to be picture perfect from the outside. 2 beautiful babies, a handsome husband, a sprawling multi-million-dollar home in the Hollywood Hills, and a young mother trying desperately to balance it all. But beneath that surface, the cracks were already forming. Deep, invisible cracks that paparazzi pressure only would make wider. Every single move was documented. Every diaper run became front page news. Every extra pound that Britney would carry after pregnancy was scrutinized and mocked. Every argument in the car was turned into, quote, trouble in paradise headlines. Kevin's past, including a previous relationship and child, were dredged up and weaponized by the tabloids. Britney was still under the unforgiving microscope of an industry that expected her to snap back to her pre-baby body, pre-baby career, and pre-baby image instantly. The same magazines that had once celebrated her romance now painted Kevin as an opportunist and Britney as an unstable young mother barely holding it together. And honestly, in private, the weight was becoming unbearable. Britney had written in her book about the combination of new motherhood, 24-hour fame, sleep deprivation, and the complete loss of any personal privacy, and how it affected her relationship and caused it to begin to erode, as well as her mental health. The crazy romance with Kevin, while filled with genuine love and passion in the beginning, it had moved so fast neither one of them had built a stable foundation that was strong enough to withstand the scrutiny. Hormonal shifts, the complete loss of privacy, it really took a toll on Britney. By the end of 2005, with 2 infants and the eyes of the entire planet watching every single breath, Britney was standing on the edge of a very public and very painful breaking point. Less than a year later, on November 7th of 2006, Britney would file for divorce from Kevin Federline in LA Superior Court. The filing cited irreconcilable differences. She requested sole physical and legal custody of Sean and Jaden. Kevin would fight back hard. What followed was a brutal, highly public custody war that played out in the courtrooms and on every magazine cover for months. Court documents revealed allegations of instability on both sides, but the tabloids focused almost exclusively on Britney, painting her as erratic, unfit, and spiraling. The pressure would become unbearable. Britney was still trying to work, recording new music, fulfilling endorsement deals while fighting for her children and navigating life as a newly single mother under really the harshest spotlight imaginable. Insiders later said she was barely sleeping, rarely eating, and feeling trapped by the very fame that had once made her feel free. On the night of February 16, 2007, Britney walked into the Esther Hair Salon in Tarzana, California. She was looking visibly distressed. Paparazzi swarmed the parking lot as usual, and what happened inside was captured in a now infamous moment that absolutely shocked the world. Britney grabbed a pair of electric clippers from the counter and began shaving her own head in front of a stunned salon staff and other customers. Strands of her signature beautiful blonde hair fell on the floor as she methodically buzzed it down to the scalp. When a hairstylist tried to intervene, Britney reportedly screamed she didn't want anyone touching her anymore and that she was tired of everyone controlling her image, her body, and her life. Eyewitnesses described her as frantic, emotional, and desperate. She left the salon with a freshly shaved head, climbed into her car, and drove off that night. The photos and video footage leaked almost immediately and circled the globe within hours. Tabloids would scream, "Britney goes bald." Late-night comedians turned it into punchlines, and the world watched what should have been a private cry for help and treated it as freaking entertainment. In her book, Britney would later reflect on that night with heartbreaking clarity. She said she had reached a point where she simply couldn't stand the objectification anymore. The wigs, the extensions, the endless pressure to look perfect. Shaving her head was, in her words, an act of reclaiming control over the one thing that still belonged to her, her body. Just days later, on February 20th, 2007, another shocking incident unfolded. Britney was driving through a gas station in Malibu when a swarm of paparazzi surrounded her car. She was overwhelmed and she felt cornered. She grabbed an umbrella from the passenger seat and began swinging it wildly at the photographers' vehicles. She smashed a taillight and dented a hood in a desperate attempt to create space. The umbrella attack was caught on video and replayed endlessly on every single news channel. Again, the narrative was not compassion, it was mockery. Britney loses it became a dominant headline. And it was these incidents that triggered a series of interventions. In the weeks that followed, Britney entered and exited rehab facilities multiple times. She checked into Promise Treatment Center in Malibu, then left after only one day. She tried another facility shortly after, but the pattern repeated. Each attempt was documented by hovering helicopters and staking out photographers. Court hearings continued over custody. In October of 2007, a judge granted Kevin temporary sole custody over those boys, citing Britney's instability. The loss of custody, as it would any woman, devastated her. Photos from that period showed a young mother who looked haunted. Her eyes were hollowed. Her movements were unsteady. And that once unstoppable performer was now barely holding herself together in public. By January of 2008, the situation had reached a breaking point. On January 3rd, Britney locked herself in her bathroom of her Beverly Hills home with her youngest son, Jaden, refusing to hand him over during a scheduled custody exchange. Police and paramedics were called. She was placed on an involuntary psychiatric hold, and this was her second psychiatric hold in less than a month. On January 14th of 2008, while Britney was still hospitalized, her father, Jamie Spears, and an attorney named Andrew Wallet filed an emergency petition in LA probate court. They asked the judge to place Britney under a temporary conservatorship. They were arguing she was unable to manage her own affairs due to mental illness struggles. On February 1st of 2008, the judge approved the petition. Britney Spears, one of the most successful entertainers on the planet at this time, was now legally placed under the control of her father, Jamie, and a co-conservator. The conservatorship gave Jamie complete authority over Britney's finances, her medical decisions, her personal life, and even her career. She couldn't even sign contracts, make large purchases, or even make basic decisions about her own body without his approval. Now, this was sold to the public as a necessary safety net for a troubled star, but in reality, it would last 13 years and become one of the most controversial legal arrangements in modern entertainment history. No doubt about it. Britney would describe those years in her book as very raw pain. She wrote about feeling like a prisoner in her own life, forced into treatment programs she didn't always agree with, separated from her children for extended periods, and watched around the clock by court-appointed monitors. This woman, who had once commanded sold-out stadiums, now needed permission to go shopping or visit a friend. The tabloid coverage, that would continue relentlessly, but that narrative slowly began to shift from crazy Britney to questions about whether the system designed to protect her had instead stripped her of her every basic right. Between 2008 and 2010, Britney tried to rebuild under the new legal constraints. She released the new album, Circus, in 2008, and she started a residency in Las Vegas. But now every move was filtered through that conservatorship. The public saw performances and smiles on stage, but behind the scenes, the legal and personal battles would continue. Custody arrangements were renegotiated. Family tensions would start to burn. And the foundation of what would later become the hashtag Free Britney movement was quietly being laid by fans who refused to believe the official story. Y'all, this was the human cost of unchecked fame. A young mother, barely in her mid-20s, had been pushed to her absolute limit by the relentless machine of celebrity culture, tabloid journalism, and an industry that demanded perfection while offering almost no real support. The conservatorship was presented as protection, but for Britney, it felt more like prison. Now, the darkest years were far from over, but the stage was now set for a new kind of struggle, one that would play out not just in the tabloids and courtrooms, but in the quiet, controlled environment of a legal cage that would define the next decade of her life. So I want to pause the chronological story here for a second, and I want to go deep into the legal machine that controlled Britney Spears' life for those 13 years and 4 months. Because understanding that conservatorship isn't just about knowing that it existed. It's also about understanding how a California probate court took one of the most successful entertainers on earth and placed her under a legal arrangement usually reserved for people in comas or with advanced dementia. And I shit you not on that. Under California's probate code, a conservatorship is a court-supervised legal relationship in which a conservator, which in this case is Britney's dad, Jamie Spears, he is appointed to manage the personal, medical, and financial affairs of the conservatee, who is deemed unable to care for themselves. Now, there are two main types that I want to explain to you. There's one that's called conservatorship of the person, and that controls where the person lives. It controls their medical decisions, their daily personal choices, and even whether they can marry or have children. Bet you didn't know that. And then there's something also called conservatorship of the estate. And that controls all the finance side of things, the contracts, the assets, and the business decision. Now, Britney's conservatorship was actually both. It's a rare general conservatorship that gives the conservators sweeping authority over every aspect of her life, both business and personal. So I want you to understand exactly what her conservatorship controlled. So Jamie Spears, and also a co-conservator, the attorney that I mentioned earlier, they received court-appointed authority to control all of her financial decisions. That included bank accounts, investments, royalties, touring income, perfume, clothing lines, even the $1,000 weekly allowance Britney was given for personal spending. Can you believe that? $1,000 a week. And she was generating many millions. That right there ought to be illegal. They could approve or deny any contract, including record deals, endorsement deals, and performance agreements. So whether she wanted to do something or not, they could say, you're doing this, and approve it, and she was legally binded by their freaking decision. They would also make all medical decisions, even going down to choosing her doctors, medications, psychiatric treatment, and whether or not she could have children. Court documents later on actually revealed she was prevented from removing her IUD. They also could decide where she lived, who she could date, who she could see, and whether she could even drive. Hire and fire staff, security, and managers, and they could sue or be sued on her behalf. And they restricted her right, as I said, to marry without court approval. I've never seen anything like that in my life, and if you told me all that was a fact, which now I know it's a fact, but if you had told me that ahead of time, I would have said there's no way on God's green earth that would be legal, but I'll be damned if it wasn't. And people wonder why this poor girl is going out of her mind right now. Britney was also placed under a no contact or monitor contact order with certain family members at various times, and her phone and social media use were heavily restricted or supervised for all that time. Y'all, this wasn't a simple guardianship like you see for elderly parents. This was a full-scale court-enforced loss of civil rights, and I blame the courts probably more than the conservators themselves because the courts made it legal, and it lasted longer than many prison sentences. It turned a global superstar into a legal ward of her own father with every dollar, every medical choice, and every performance contract requiring court approval. Unbelievable. Absolutely crazy, sick, and mind-boggling to me. And by the beginning of 2011, Britney Spears had been living under the full weight of this permanent conservatorship for almost 3 years. Now, the legal agreement that had been sold to the public as a protective safety net had now become the invisible framework shaping every single day of her existence. On paper, she was still the highest paid female artist in the world, but in reality, she was a legal ward of her father, Jamie, and that co-conservator, Andrew Wallet. But you know, it's interesting, the conservatorship, as much as it was, quote, concerned about her mental health, they didn't stop her career. They actually accelerated it under strict supervision. Britney was expected to work, to smile, to deliver all these pop hits that the world still wanted, all while her personal life remained tightly controlled behind the scenes. So in March of 2011, she releases her 7th studio album, Femme Fatale. It was a sleek, futuristic dance record packed with heavy bass drops and club-ready anthems. And the lead single, quote, Hold It Against Me, debuted at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. It was her 4th chart-topping single. The music video had some high fashion, it was very futuristic, and it was shot under the watchful eye of the conservatorship. Britney would perform the album on Good Morning America in the Billboard Music Awards and launched the Femme Fatale Tour that summer, a high-energy spectacle filled with elaborate choreography, costume changes, and pyrotechnics, and she put on one hell of a show for those concerts. On stage, she looked every bit the untouchable pop icon. Flawless makeup, razor-sharp dance moves, $1 million smile just locked in place. Audience would scream along to songs like Till the World Ends and I Wanna Go, and the ticket sales, they were strong. But insiders who worked on that tour later described a very different reality backstage. Britney was accompanied at all times by corner-pointed monitors. Phone calls were limited and often recorded. Rehearsals were tightly scheduled, and any sign of fatigue or emotional distress was quickly managed by that team. The woman who once improvised freely in the studio now operated inside the proverbial box. That following year, 2012, brought more public milestones, carefully curated by the Conservatorship. Britney became a judge on the hit reality show The X Factor. She was sitting alongside Simon Cowell. It was a major television commitment, and it generated huge ratings. It also further stabilized her image as a polished professional entertainer. She coached contestants with warmth and encouragement, but behind the scenes of that arrangement, everything was not what it seemed. Every on-camera appearance, every contract clause, every travel schedule required probate court approval. In November 2013, she released her 8th studio album, Britney Jean, her first album of original material in almost 3 years. The record carried a more personal tone in places. There was a track titled Work Bitch and another titled Perfume that hinted at the pressure she was living under. Critics noted the album felt somewhat constrained, as if created inside the very cage the lyrics somehow referred to in reference. And that project coincided with the launch of her long-running Las Vegas residency, Britney Pieces of Me, that opened on December 27th, 2013 at Planet Hollywood Resort and Casino. The residency was a massive financial success for the estate. Britney performed 248 shows over 4 years. She grossed more than $137 million before it ended in 2017. Each night, she would deliver high-octane, 2-hour performances filled with her biggest hits, costume changes, aerial stunts, and signature dance routines. Fans would fly in from all around the world to see the pop princess in her element. The shows were tight, professional, and visually stunning, exactly what the conservatorship required to keep the money flowing and the public narrative intact. Former staff members later described an environment of constant oversight. Drivers, securities, and minders reported directly to the conservators. And public meltdowns still occurred, though they were quickly spun or minimized by the team. In 2014 and 2015, there were reports of erratic behavior at airports and hotels. Moments when the smiling stage persona slipped and the exhaustion would show through. Health scares, including a 2016 hospitalization for what was described as a stomach issue but later tied to ongoing stress, kept the tabloids buzzing. But Britney would push forward. She would return to the Vegas stage night after night, delivering flawless performances while privately navigating the emotional toll of limited contact with her children and the knowledge of her entire empire being run by other people. So in 2016, she releases her 9th studio album, Glory, which many critics hailed as one of her strongest and most mature works. The lead single, Make Me, featured G-Eazy, and it showed a sensual, confident artist still evolving. The album debuted at number 3 on the Billboard 200 and featured more creative input from Britney than any of her previous projects. Yet even this creative moment existed within the conservatorship framework. Every lyric, every video treatment, every promotional appearance still required a sign-off from Jamie Spears in the court. Throughout these years, subtle clues began appearing in her work and in public appearances that, in hindsight, hinted at inner turmoil. Lyrics about control, fighting back, longing for freedom took on new weight when viewed through the conservatorship. In interviews, she remained carefully scripted, praising her father and the team around her, but fans who followed every Instagram post and every Vegas show, they started noticing the flatness behind her eyes on certain nights. Former managers and collaborators who work with her during this period would speak of a woman who was an absolute professional on stage, but who lived in a state of quiet, controlled isolation off it. She was earning tens of millions of dollars for the estate, yet she only received $1,000 a week. She was performing for thousands of screaming fans several nights a week, yet she couldn't even make basic decisions about her own medical care or even her personal relationships. The contrast between glittering public careers and the restricted private life, that would create a pressure cooker that would eventually fuel the growing #Free Britney movement. And by the end of 2017, as the Pieces of Me residency entered its final stretch, Britney had become one of the most successful residency performers in Las Vegas history. She had released new music, judged television shows, toured, and maintained an image of a resilient pop survivor. But the woman inside the machine was exhausted, isolated, and quietly desperate for the day when the legal cage might finally open. The conservatorship had turned her into a highly profitable, tightly controlled entertainment asset, and the world was still buying tickets and still streaming the hits. Very few people outside of her inner circle understood that the real story was no longer about fame or fortune. It was about a woman fighting in silence under legal constraint to reclaim the most basic rights that most of us take for granted. The stage lights were still burning bright, but the first cracks in the conservatorship's foundation, they were already forming. Cracks that fans, social media, and a growing army of supporters would soon begin to widen completely on their own. And in the next episode, I'm going to cover the birth of the Free Britney movement in 2018, the explosive 2021 courtroom testimony that shocked the world, and the long, hard fight that finally ended that conservatorship after 13 brutal years. Stay tuned for that and more as I continue with Notorious, the shocking life of Britney Spears. Until then, for Exposed, I'm your host, Jim Chapman. Much love.